In the tradition of Malcolm X, peace be unto you. It was impossible centuries ago for any of our ancestors to have understood that they were the victims of a worldview applied as capitalism and, number two, a resurrected form of white supremacy, or what actually, in essence, was and is ancient Aryanism, which originated in India within the Hindu religion. Slave plantations were not only a concentration labor camp, but slaves were also captives in what sociologist Irving Goffman defined as a total institution of indoctrination. The food slaves ate were determined by the slave masters, and they were forced to eat what amounted to garbage from the dinner table of the slave master. And what they were told about themselves, both individually and as a group in relation to the world, was garbage. The condition in which African slaves lived was subject to classical psychological conditioning. It was a psyops situation. The objective in each and every generation and throughout life was to isolate Africans individually and as a group, to segregate them, and finally, if necessary, eliminate them, and or at least eliminate all knowledge that they might have of self, and then replace it with knowledge of self that they determined, which of course was equivalent to garbage. We all have had experiences, K through 12. Now, I never heard K through 12. I never heard the name Aryan or Aryan openly mentioned in schools I attended. Not one time. And needless to say, every teacher I had, K through 12, was white, either a white male or a white female, who were white supremacists. Not even at the university level. In the many, many courses I took from top of the line professors, some world renowned, never once in a history course, a political science course, a sociology course did I hear them mention Aryanism and define it in their lectures. Unless, of course, it was narrowly defined or applied to Adolf Hitler's race propaganda against Jews or his National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party ideology. The word was never defined in its broad scope, and that was intentional. We were not taught that it was a global religious movement cloaked as ideology or articulated through the form of modern European Christianity, which of course bled over into the Americas, Canada, the United States, Central America, Mexico, of course, and South America. The Aryan religion has been implied in every repressive act or act of omission against African Americans, indigenous people, and Latinos in the United States. Now, this is a touchy point that I'm going to make because many of you claim to be Christian. And the problem is you don't know what Jesus taught. You only know what Romans determined would be the scripture that you read. And that is a historical truth. That is a literary fact. But the Christianity that we have been exposed to is a benign form of Aryanism, and it is benign because it implies two ideas. The benign methodology is to inform us through images and mythologies which excite and entertain us. The European version of Christianity implies that if you are not a Christian, then you are inferior and damned, and that if you are non-white, you cannot ever be equal to white people. Those are the two implications in every Christian church or denomination in the United States. And all you need to do is look at the pictures, look at the images. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Those two hidden assumptions are deeply embedded within the non-white individual and their collective subconscious worldview. They're not conscious of their worldview. It is that through which they define themselves. That makes everyone subject to institutions in the United States at some time in their lives, which we all are, because we are born into that culture. That makes everyone, to some degree, a white supremacist. All people in the United States are socialized to be white supremacists. Today, their indoctrination, as I said, is usually benign, that you really don't know what's happening unless you know what to look for. It is done to them in ways that are non-threatening and entertaining, emotional. Ways that are made pleasant or pleasurable experiences for them. Watch a movie, a comedy, a drama, a romance movie. It's made pleasurable for you to accept the imagery that's being projected into your mind. The forums are mass interpersonal interactions like public and private schools, but also through impersonal media interactions 24 hours, 7 days a week, in both imagery and in print. I remember once I was in Mexico with my wife, and we had disembarked a boat, and there were shopping stalls operated by Mexican citizens selling different items. And my wife saw something that attracted her attention, and she went and viewed the item, and she started inquiring about the cost of the item. And as she interacted with the seller, a white woman came up, and the seller actually disengaged the conversation with my wife and moved to the white prospective buyer and began to engage her. It was so obvious what motivated the Mexican seller to do that. It was a female. She was a white supremacist. And her attraction to the white woman was evidence of her subconscious acknowledgement of her superiority and my wife's inferiority, because she's of African descent. Well, of course, my wife interrupted their exchange and said, "You will not get a single penny from me." And we walked away. Now, a similar kind of incident had happened on a couple of other islands in the Caribbean. And they were people of African descent who did it, because they're white supremacists too. This is a pervasive problem among people of African descent in the Americas. They have internalized the worldview of Aryanism or white supremacy, and they give preferential treatment to white people. And if you pay attention to the politics here in the United States, you will see the same thing happening with these so-called political leaders, African Americans running for office. You will see the same preferential treatment they give to white people. White people run their campaigns. White people are the donors they seek out, and they follow the party line, which is defined by white people. You don't have political leaders in Washington, D.C. that represent the interests of the African American community. You have African Americans with dark skin who are white supremacists. That's what you are dealing with. And you will be better able to protect yourself as soon as you understand that. Because they will come out for your vote and they will lie, make you think that they are for your interest when actually they're just big puppets on a string. Most people don't know when indoctrination is happening to them. It is astounding that a whole population is literally put into automatic sleepwalk through life, which is what most people do anyway. They are operating on habit and memory. They substitute their predetermined worldview for reality. They take the worldview and they reject reality. Pretending that their worldview is reality, they then respond to it in relation to others and the ecosystem. For instance, just recently, a mass grave of 751 indigenous children in Canada was unearthed adjacent to a Catholic boarding school which had operated from 1896 to 1998. That's almost 100 years. In the boarding school, the children were forced to accept Christianity. They were physically forced, and to assimilate Canadian, which is British or white supremacist culture, by not using their language at all and not dressing in their traditional clothing. That's repression. The children were subject to operant conditioning in modern psychological terminology, because they were beaten and abused to force them to conform. What happened to those children was not an example of what the teacher from Nazareth taught and practiced, whether you subscribe to the traditional belief or not. It wasn't what that person taught nor practiced. It was the methodology of Aryanism, which had co-opted Christianity in Europe in the Enlightenment period and had spread throughout the Americas and was the source of the casta system in Latin America, which is white on top of black. White supremacy is a synonym for what is called in the Hindu language of Sanskrit the Aryan caste. The noun Aryan was in vogue during the Age of Enlightenment. In the 16th century, European intellectuals who were anti-Christian, anti-African, anti-Semitic, atheistic, advocated Aryanism as their ancient pagan original religion, as it had been advocated in India for over 2,000 years. In 1775, a German anthropologist and medical doctor, Johann Blumenbach, proclaimed Caucasians, which is a term that he coined, to be the beautiful race, as does Hinduism. Slowly but surely, Aryanism infiltrated the university curricula of both religious and secular colleges in Europe and the United States. You can go to UC Berkeley right now and count the number of buildings named after eugenicists. It eventually came to be the popular worldview of every secular institution and Christian denomination in Europe and the Americas. Believers in Aryanism, and in whatever form it takes, claim blatantly or indirectly racial superiority. You can find them in prisons, and you find them in the White House. You find them in the Supreme Court. You find them in the FBI, the CIA. All of their institutions, the whole criminal justice system, is defined and operated by white supremacists who are either knowingly or robotically Aryan in their beliefs. They claim their whiteness to be proof of their individual and collective superiority. We're talking about skin. They claim their skin, which all animals have some skin, to be a sign of their superiority. They claim that God is a white man. And if they don't claim that verbally, they claim it with pictures. Look at the pictures. Turn off the entertainment impulse and look at the pictures, and you'll know what's going on and what the goal is with respect to influencing your self-concept and your behavior. They use still pictures, they use motion pictures in movie houses to suggest the idea to all children who pass through them that they are either superior or inferior. They believe that their children must be marked, that is, damaged, made a little crazy for life, by believing that it is skin color that marks them as superior. Now, the doctors Kenneth and Mamie Clark proved the lifetime damage that marking or damaging children early can do with their baby doll selection experiment. I'm not going to go into detail on what they did, but you can go to YouTube and type in baby doll experiment and watch for yourself. We can see the lifetime effects in black or white adults who act out the conditioned worldview they experienced as young children through some of their most important life choices. Watch what they choose, and you can see in real time and space the worldview through which they see the world and interpret reality. Now, the fundamental premise of Aryanism is in the original Hindu catechism and the law code of Manu. They claim that their race was made by a god, Purusha. The English noun, for instance, mankind, is derived from the Sanskrit noun Manu. In other words, every time you say man or read man, you are subliminally being suggested to that Manu is your God. Man is derived from the Sanskrit Manu, who wrote the law code of racial purity. Linguistic, psychological manipulation and control over us is so deep that it might turn your hair gray if you knew how much they invest in controlling your worldview. And of course, the evidence of it is the language that you use, the name that you have, the symbols used to construct the name that you have, are all indicative of a greater power that has defined the thought-scape, like landscape, the thought-scape that you must interpret the world through. And let me say, it is extremely difficult to escape the language that you use. You can, but it is extremely difficult. And that is the essence of mind control, right there. I am Dr. Stephen Nur Ahmed. Peace be unto you.